Good morning, it's Tom Beresford here from behaviour, coming to you guys live from London. So thank you so much for joining us. My business is behaviour, and as some of you may know, we are the inventors, manufacturers and distributors of the world's leading wine and champagne preservation systems, products that go by the name of Le Verre de Vin Plus and Pod Bar Plus. We've been in the US market now for 25 years, with coverage in literally every single state from the western seaboard through to the eastern, and we're proud to work with many of the leading operators across the hospitality industry. Through that 25 years, we've gathered a fair bit of information, know-how, and an understanding of how the wine by the glass market works and the wine industry as a whole works. And what we're going to do today is share with you a few of the latest ideas in terms of what's happening currently, what are your customers thinking, what are they up to, and how can we make the very most of that when it comes to running a successful wine program. So, with no further ado, we'll jump straight in. And what I want to do is just to spend a couple of moments now looking at the evolution of the market. How did we get to where we are today? And what does some of that data mean about our consumers, how they're behaving, and how we can make the most of it with our wine programs? So first things first, a quick look back. Consumption has been growing. So if we look at wine consumption per resident in the United States from 2005 all the way through to 2020, there has been a significant, albeit gradual, increase in the amount of wine that is consumed per individual. Looking a little bit further into that data, we can see what's driving that growth. And it's our millennials and it's our Gen Xers who are driving the growth in consumption. So this next generation of wine consumer are coming through. And not only are they drinking wine, they're drinking more of it than their parents did. That's a valuable trend that we'll talk about again further down the road. So to give you a couple of big headlines, what does that mean? Well, total wine consumption in the USA has grown 40% in the last 15 years. That, when you think about it, is a phenomenal number. There's some data there, but actually the big headline is that in the US, last year, the total value of all wine sales was over $68 billion. So this is a big business. Looking again at the consumer of today and some of the trends around what they're doing, the consumers now in the United States, you guys are the #1 wine consumer on the planet. So congratulations. I always thought we here in the UK did a pretty good job of punching above our weight, given that we're only about 70 million versus your 300 million. But you guys have finally taken the gold spot. And you are the world's #1 consumer of wine and also champagne. Interestingly, and this really plays into our hands as hospitality professionals, what we're seeing is that the growth is coming through in the premium end of the market. So to bring that to life, wines in the $9 and under category continuing to see declines both in value and volume. Growth now is in that $10 to $20 bracket. That's where we're finding it. Actually, some data here from Nielsen looking last year, 20% growth in the sales of wine in between that $11 and $25 space. And actually at an even higher price point, so at the top end of the bracket, at $20 to $25 retail prices, we're looking at nearly 30% growth in value and the same again in volume of overall wine sales. What does that mean? Well, there's a graph here which, bear with me, looks a little bit like economics, but it's an important statistic because what you'll see is that where the blue and the orange graphs are coming apart, that's where we're seeing a decline in the number of cases, but value staying strong. And that means that for less wine sold, we're still returning the same amount, if not more money, i.e. consumers are trading up, spending more, and buying a better quality of wine to drink at home. So that's off-premise data, but we know that off-premise behaviour and consumer behaviour filters into on-premise and hospitality sales. Take one little sector of the wine industry and let's just pull it out and highlight it. Rosé. So rosé and sparkling rosé is a category which has maintained double-digit growth for the past 5 years. So compounding up, there's no signs of this thing slowing down. The rosé juggernaut is gathering speed, if anything. Look at that as a statistic. A 33% year-on-year increase in rosé sales from 2018 to 2019 alone. So this is big business. Recap, a few points there that I highlighted, but in summary, what it tells us is wine consumption is strong, but value is strong. We're drinking better. We're drinking more and we're drinking better, but also we're drinking a more varied selection of wines now than probably we ever have done in the US market. That, rosé is a very good example. We're all pretty familiar with it now, but that's driving some incredible growth and has done over the last few years in as a percentage of overall wine sales. So, taking a look at that consumer who is spending a little bit more, they're interested in the premium end of the category. They've had no choice. They've been locked at home for the last year, drinking a better quality of wine than they probably ever have done before, and being willing to be a little bit more experimental and to try new things. So those are some macro trends that we know from data that's provided by solid, reputable sources like Nielsen remains true. How can we, as operators in our industry, take that and turn it into something that delivers a phenomenal guest experience and ultimately delivers better revenue and better profit for us as operators? So here we go. These are our big five. So I'm gonna run through each of these in a little bit of detail with you this morning. But to give you the rundown, we're going to look at recommendations. We're going to look at formats. We're going to look at promotions, consumer experience, and pricing. So jumping into recommendations, how can we make the very most of the power of recommendation? You guys as professionals, as sommeliers, as hospitality operators, you have the knowledge, you have the know-how, you spend hours and hours carefully curating your wine list and your wine program, your by the glass selections. Here's how you do it. You pull out something new, something exciting, something hot, and you highlight it. It might be a wine of the month. It might be a manager's recommendation. It could be a vineyard special. If you happen to be in a wine producing region, maybe just pulling out a great local producer who's put something together and highlighting that as something that your guests can buy into. That's a pretty exciting way to start recommending. Also, in this regard, your staff are your greatest asset. We talk about this over and over again. And my head of marketing has a great term. He says that your staff do not need to be a team of sommeliers. They don't need to be masters of wine. They need to be wine ninjas. They need to have small nuggets of well-practiced information so they can confidently talk about your by the glass selections and encourage your guests to trade up and spend a little bit more. Let's talk about champagne. Champagne, obviously a drink for celebrations. Despite the fact that pretty much around the world we've not had too much to celebrate over the last 18 months, champagne sales continue to skyrocket. And as guests start coming back into on-premise and coming back into restaurants and bars, we're looking for them to go beyond that special occasion mentality. What I mean is that you don't have to have a glass of champagne because it's your birthday or because it's Christmas. Why not celebrate Happy Hump Day on a Wednesday afternoon with a glass of champagne? Why not celebrate seeing friends for the first time in months by enjoying champagne together? Easy way of taking advantage of this, if you've got a great selection of champagnes by the glass, is to have your servers and to have your staff confident talking about them, talking about differences. So not just Brut, but being able to introduce rosé, tell them what Blanc de Blanc is, why you've got a vintage champagne on. Maybe you've got a champagne from a lesser known grower type producer. What's the story? If your staff are able to bring that to life for their guests, then they'll drive the incremental sale, they'll drive that upsell through. Next is serving formats. So, hey, we're all familiar with the 6 ounce pour, the 8 ounce pour, and the difference between them. But how about being a little bit more experimental and getting a little bit more excited around tasters and flights? So, tasters. Well, if I'm a consumer who comes into the restaurant week after week, maybe it's one of your regular guests, always drinks the same thing, at the same price point, maybe $10, $12 for a glass of wine. If you've got something that's in a similar space that's going to take them on a journey, it's perhaps a little bit more expensive, but you know that it's a better glass of wine, being able to deliver a taste of that to the guest first will give them the confidence to trade up. It encourages them to spend a little bit more money. when we spend a little bit more, we want to be confident that we're making a good decision. And a little 1 ounce pour or a small taste before you serve the full glass is a great way of doing it. It encourages guests who maybe haven't been so adventurous historically to get a little bit more excited and to try something new for the first time. Similarly is flights of wine, So we see flights, and I think historically flights have always been something that's seen as very fine dining. You enjoy a flight of wine with a tasting menu. Well, why not do the Judgment of Paris all over again and have a couple of wines from Napa versus a couple of wines from Bordeaux as a small flight? Allow people to experiment, to see their differences. You could do the same thing with Chardonnay. You could take Chardonnay from the New World, New Zealand or Chile, play it up against something fine from Burgundy versus California. Allow your guests to have a little bit of fun and to experiment. And all of the time that they're doing this, they're trading up, they're making more premium choices, and they're bringing more revenue into your business. Just a few of the ideas there. So discovery flights, like I just talked about. It could be one grape variety across different wine producing regions of the world. It could be that you just take different vintages of the same wine. It could be that you take different grape varieties from the same producers. Champagne flights, an amazing way, again, of telling that story from Brut to Rosé to Blanc, and doing something like that. So all the way through this, you'll notice a thread, and it probably won't come as any surprise to you, that we talk about the power of By the Glass. By the Glass is the gateway to introducing consumers to more premium selections and to a better quality of wine. Now we're talking about our selections. We've got our tasters, we've got our flights, we've got our tuned up, trained up staff who are little wine ninjas with their perfectly practiced bits of knowledge. How do we get guests in the door? How do we encourage people to come down and try this experience? Well, social media now is the way to engage with your guests. It's the way to drive people into your business. But as this page, I always think this is a great way of bringing social to life. It's a big, confusing world. So let's get focused. We think that there's 3 key social channels that you need to be taking advantage of in your business: Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Let's kick off with Facebook. It's the biggest. It is still the biggest social platform in the world. There's some big headline figures there. Lots of them are almost too big, almost to even make sense. The one at the bottom, though, I think for us as industry professionals, is a really salient one. And that's that nearly 50% of people who use Facebook use it to find places to go and eat. So, an important statistic. If we move on then into Twitter, what's the fuss about? What's Twitter all about? Beyond, people getting angry and arguing with one another about politics or whatever it might be on a global stage. Well, again, look at the last piece of data there. Compared to other industries on Twitter, Twitter users have the highest engagement with restaurants. So you want to start telling the story about your wine program. Twitter is a great way of having that conversation with your guests. And then we've got, the millennials' favorite, Instagram. So 1 billion users, important feed, sort of important data in here. But again, picking on that last point, the number 1 social media app for engagement with restaurant brands. So creating a strong following for your restaurant, Instagram's the place to do it. How do you take advantage? How do you capitalize on these social channels and get the most out of them for your business? Well, there's a few ideas here. We know from the data I've just shown you that consumers are using social to inspire choices, to decide where they want to go out. If you've got a great wine team, if you've got a great som, if you've got someone in your business who's really passionate, get them online, get them on your YouTube channel, get them on your Instagram Live, whatever it might be, talking about what you guys are doing. Maybe show some of the tasters, pairings, those vineyard specials, managers' recommendations. Bring your wine program to life. We always say this. Alongside that substance, you do need a little bit of style. And you need to make sure the content that you're putting together hits the notes in terms of quality. It's easy, I'm sure, when you scroll to just get lost in a sea of content. So how do you make sure your content stands out? Well, there's a few good ideas here. There's a food and wine pairing on the left. There's a beautiful looking restaurant, which is kind of wine centric with all of the stemware laid out on the tables. And then on the right-hand side, we've obviously got a really nice food and wine matching experience, that one being paired with Ayala champagne. Why is this important? Well, here's a statistic for you. 76% of consumers have ordered a cocktail that they've seen that's been posted on social media. So, 3/4 of your guests are potentially ordering something they see on your social channel. Why not get your great wine program up on your social media? Similarly, engage. 70+% of consumers are more likely to recommend a restaurant if they're responded to quickly on social media. People want to be able to engage with you. They want to talk to you. They want to find out what time last seating is, whether they can bring their own wines, what your by the glass list looks like, these sorts of things. And actually, it's not just about responding to fussy guests. This drives revenue. Customer spend increases by 40% or more for brands who engage with their followers on social media. Similarly, and I'm sure we've all seen this amongst our friends and families and people that we follow in the industry, today's guests share great experiences. Nearly 70% of millennials like a full major technical blackout there. But we're back in the room, so hopefully there wasn't too much downtime and a few of you have managed to stay on the stream. As I was saying, our guests today, and we know it, they share great experiences. We've all seen it when you put a plate of food down in front of a guest where they take a quick photo before they eat it. A lot of chefs that I know now are actually preparing dishes designed to be finished at the table in order that people can take photos or film it while it's being done. So, moving on, consumer experience, making it an experience, and we know now that 3/4 of adults would rather spend money on experiences than possessions. So rather than buying stuff, our guests would rather buy experiences and buy things to do with their friends and their family and their loved ones and on date nights or whatever it might be. So what can we do and how can we bring it to life? Well, it might be that we run a wine tasting event, we could run a producer afternoon, we could run a special try the list event for an evening. Champagne cocktails is another one that's there. That's always a really good way of driving an upsell and driving a higher dollar per drink opportunity. Then, once we've considered all of that, it's about how do we get our guests to engage with our wine program? How do we get them to trade up? How do we get them to want that glass of Ruinart Rosé? Well, we need to put our assets on show, right? We need to make sure that if we're running a great wine program, it's in front of our guests. You want your premium wines at eye level. There's eye-catching producers. There's people like Orange Swift, the champagne houses. They spend fortunes developing brands that people can recognize from across a bar. So get them on show, get them on sale. Also, have something different for your guests to try. The blue orange is always a good analogy here, but over 80% of your customers now in a post-COVID world are up for trying something new. So how about skin contact wine? How about orange wine? How about biodynamic? How about small grower champagnes? How about something that's produced in your region, even if you're not an established wine producing region of the States? Being brave and having something new, you'd be surprised how much your guests are prepared to go with you on that journey. And then lastly is being able to tell the story. So this ties into your staff, it ties into your team. As I said, we're not all fortunate enough to have sommelier working in our business every day, but making sure that your teams have a favorite wine, a favorite story, and they understand not every producer on your list, but one or two of the key upsell producers. They know a little bit about the story of the wine, the story of the family behind it. So to summarize what I was talking about in terms of how do we implement this? Well, recommend where you can and recommend where it's relevant, making sure your staff have got those little perfectly prepared bits of knowledge that they can deliver to guests who are willing to spend more money. Develop your serving formats. So mess around with tasters, flights, carafes, pichets, glass sizes. Allow your customers to really curate their own drinking experience when they visit your establishment. Don't forget social media. It's an obvious one in the current environment, but your social channel is your window to the world. And some of those statistics that I just shared with you are pretty compelling. it does drive adoption and it does drive revenue. And then finally is make sure the experience is educational and interesting. Your customers have a thirst, forgive the pun, for wine and to learn more about wine. And if you're taking them on that journey, you'll be surprised how much money they're willing to spend with you along the way. So I hope that's been a useful summary, a recap in terms of some of the trends around today's consumer, how they're behaving, what they're doing, what they're drinking and what they're spending, and then looking at how we can get the most out of that when we're running our wine programs in our on-premise accounts. As I said, we're Pamar. You may or may not be familiar with our products already. We invent, manufacture and distribute the world's leading wine and champagne preservation systems. So when it comes to supporting a lot of what I've talked about today, a fantastic extended range of wine and champagne by the glass, you can be confident you're in safe hands if you've got one of our systems powering your service. So I'm sure a few of you may have questions. Please feel free to jump in. I'm here and I'm not in a hurry to go anywhere, so I'm happy to stick around and answer anything you guys might have. There is a small lag, so just bear with me. Seems like I did a pretty good job because no one has any questions. I'll give it another few seconds. Fantastic. Okay. Hey, listen, thank you so much for joining us, guys. If you want to learn more about us, reach out to the team, bemarAmerica.com. We're here. You've got a team of wine professionals who will help you make the very most of your service and to capitalize on some of those consumer trends that we've talked about this morning. Have a great day, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Cheers.